In this video, we're going to be looking at graphing linear inequalities. Example 1, parts A and B, we're going to be starting with some basic inequalities that only have one variable. Remember, anytime you are graphing these inequalities, you do need to shade on one side of your line or another. So the upper side, typically, if it's a greater than sign, the lower side, if it's a less than sign. Also, you have to keep in mind your dotted and solid lines. Your lines will be dotted if your inequality is less than or a greater than with no line under the inequality. They will be solid if it's less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. So if you have that line under the inequality, you're going to have a solid line. If there's no line under the inequality, you're going to have a dotted line. So for part A, we have x is less than 3. Since there is no line under the inequality, this line is going to be dotted. X lines are vertical. So to draw this line, I'm going to go to 3 and make my dot. And then I'm going to draw a dotted line that goes through the graph at x equals 3. So now we want to look at the inequality. My inequality is less than. This is the only situation where you can't think about above and below because vertical lines do not have an above or have a below. They have a left and a right. So you need to think about where all the values of x are less than 3. And if we think about the x-axis as a number line with 3 at this, where I have this blue dot, the numbers that are less than 3 would be 2, 1, 0, -1. Those numbers all occur to the left, which means we are going to be shading to the left of this line. And again, it is important that you do your shading whenever you're graphing your inequalities. For part B, we have y is less than -1. Again, this is going to be a dotted line because we have no line under the inequality. Y lines are horizontal. So I'm going to go up to y equals 1, and I'm going to draw a dotted horizontal line that passes through at y equals 1. This one you can think about the above and below. So we have y is less than 1. So the values that are going to be less than are going to fall on the lower side of that line. So when we shade, we're going to shade the lower side. Okay, and that's graphing and shading vertical and horizontal inequalities. The next example that we have is an equation that is in y equals mx plus b form. Now, instead of an equal sign, it has an inequality, but we would still consider this a slope-intercept or y equals mx plus b type of equation. So first, I'm going to determine what type of line I have. There's a line under the inequality, which means this line is going to be solid. So whenever I graph this, I'm not going to have to make that dotted line. I can not pick up my pencil and just draw straight through it and make it solid. Next, we would identify our b. Remember, b comes at the end of our slope-intercept form. It's what's added to the x. So in this case, my b is +2. That's where I start on the y-axis. You graph almost everything on the y-axis. The only time you're going to start on the x-axis is if you are graphing a line that is x equals a number like we did in example 1a. Otherwise, everything else is going to be on the y. Our slope is going to be the number that is multiplied by x, which is 3/5, which means we are going up 3 from the 2. You always start at the y-intercept. Up 3, 1, 2, 3, and over to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I can draw in my solid line there. Now this inequality is less than or equal to. Less than means we shade below. So rather than shading, if I number these sides as 1 and 2, side 1 would be considered the upper side of the line. Side 2 would be your lower side of the line. So side 2 is where we are going to shade. The last type of question you'll see is a question where it is not currently in slope-intercept form, and we have to solve to get the y by itself in the inequality. This will be a solid line, but I'm not going to make any determination about shading above or below until I get the y by itself. With inequalities, there are occasions where you may have to flip the direction the inequality opens, and I'll explain what I mean by that in the process of solving. So we have 2x minus y is less than or equal to 2. We've done a couple of questions like this with an equal sign, and the process is the same with an inequality, at least to begin with. Subtract the 2x. Bring down the negative with the y. So we have negative y is less than or equal to negative 2x plus 2. We have to get the y by itself, so we are dividing everything by negative 1. In an inequality, when you divide by a negative number, whether it's a negative 1 like I did here, or a negative 2 or a negative 3, the inequality changes the direction that it opens. So instead of a less than or equal to, this is going to be a greater than or equal to. So y is greater than or equal to a positive 2x minus 2. So again, we switch the inequality when you divide by a negative. Hopefully you can see all of that. Switch the inequality whenever you divide by a negative. Okay, well that's just going to have to stay where it's at. Now we have to finish off by graphing this. So we go down to negative 2, again on the y-axis because my y-intercept is negative 2. Our slope is positive 2. So from that negative 2, we are rising 2 and running to the right 2, or 1, I'm sorry. Rising 2, running to the right 1. Remember, if your slope is not currently a fraction, you can put a 1 in the denominator to make it a fraction. This is a solid line, so we can go ahead and connect those dots. To shade, we want to go by what we found out once we were solving the equation. So I'm using this inequality, this greater than or equal to. Greater than means we're shading in the upper side. So of these two choices here, if I number these side 1 and side 2, side 1 is going to be your upper side. So that's where we're going to shade. And sometimes the shading can be the most difficult part about these, just trying to be sure of whether you're shading on the correct side of your line. The steeper the line gets, usually the more confusing it is, but just try to think about what would be the upper side of the line, what would be the lower side of the line. Hopefully this helps you in your work that you have to do in inequalities. Just like how I always end, please contact me if you have any questions.